For 3 long years, Captain Daniel Hayes had lived in the silence and darkness of his secluded cabin, tucked deep into the woods where no one came unless they were lost or desperate. And perhaps that's why he chose it, because after the war took his sight and left him scarred both inside and out, he wanted nothing to do with the world that had moved on without him. He had been a decorated war hero once, proud and steady, but when the bullets stopped flying and the medals stopped coming, all that was left were the ghosts of fallen brothers and the endless night behind his useless eyes. The cabin became his sanctuary and his prison, every creaking floorboard and every familiar step he could trace in perfect memory. But beyond those walls lay a world he couldn't face, a world too cruel to let him be whole again. His days were slow rhythms of habit, chopping wood by touch, brewing bitter coffee he never tasted, listening to the wind whistle through the trees like voices he could almost recognize, until that one night, when the skies roared and the heavens split open with a storm so violent it seemed the earth itself wanted to shake him from his exile. The rain lashed against the cabin roof. The wind howled like artillery fire, and in the middle of it all, just as Daniel was bracing himself for another night of memories he couldn't silence, came a frantic knock at his door. At first he thought it was the storm playing tricks on him, but then it came again, harder, desperate, human. With hesitation carved into every step, he opened the door to find not the shadows of his past, but the trembling voice of a woman soaked to the bone pleading for shelter. She introduced herself as Emily, a stranger who had been caught in the storm after her car broke down on the back road, and though Daniel's sightless eyes couldn't see her face, he could hear everything in her voice, the fear, the relief, the quiet strength, and for the first time in years, his cabin no longer felt like a tomb, but like the threshold to something he thought he'd lost forever. Little did he know, letting her in that night would change everything, because storms don't just break trees and scatter roads. Sometimes they deliver people into our lives who carry the light we've been running from. The days after Emily's arrival unfolded like a story Daniel never believed he'd get to live, because what began as a single night of shelter turned into a week, then 2, as the storm damage had left the roads closed and her return delayed, and in that strange twist of fate, the blind soldier and the lost woman became companions under the same wooden roof. Daniel, who once thought his life had ended with the war, began to feel his world stirring with color he could no longer see but could feel in every word and laugh Emily shared. She described the world outside, his cabin, with such vivid detail that he could almost imagine it: sunlight spilling over the pines, the sparkle of the river swollen with rain, the way the storm had painted everything fresh and alive, and, though he couldn't see her, he found himself memorizing every tone of her voice, every breath, every pause, until it became the anchor that steadied his wounded soul. Emily, in turn, discovered in Daniel not just a man hardened by scars, but one softened by resilience, someone who, despite his blindness, could split logs with precision, navigate his home with unshakable grace, and share stories of the battlefield with a depth that revealed both the pain of loss and the beauty of brotherhood. As days turned into nights filled with laughter and quiet talks by the fire, something unspoken grew between them, a tenderness that neither dared name but both felt with every heartbeat. Daniel began to realize that Emily wasn't just a visitor. She was the storm's gift, the light that forced its way through his darkness, and Emily began to see that the war veteran's cabin wasn't a place of exile, but a place waiting to be reborn into a home. When the roads finally cleared and Emily was offered a way back to her old life, she stood at the door with her bag packed, torn between the world she had left behind and the man who had shown her a kind of strength she never knew existed. And Daniel, with all the courage of a soldier and the vulnerability of a man who had nothing left to lose, told her in a trembling voice that though he couldn't see her, he had never seen anyone more clearly in his life. Tears streamed down her face as she set her bag aside and chose not to leave, because sometimes storms don't just bring destruction, they bring destiny. And so, the blind veteran who once lived in silence and solitude found himself living again, not in the darkness of his blindness, but in the light of love that Emily carried to his door, proving that even the fiercest storms can lead us to the calm we've been searching for all along. And dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to our channel, because we share more inspiring,